So season 3 of Bridgerton just came out. My favorite character, Penelope, got a gorgeous green glow-up dress, so I'm making my own to celebrate. But am I even allowed to cosplay Penelope? We'll get to that. But first I had to plan this cosplay, so let me tell you about my new favorite cosplay planning tool, Milanote. Milanote's a tool for organizing your creative projects, and it has quickly become my favorite way to plan out all the details of making a cosplay. I like to work with a totally blank board, but Milanote lets you choose from over 100 built-in templates. Obviously, first thing I need is some reference photos, and you can just drag and drop them onto your board. I love a to-do list, and I actually like to do my to-do lists in order and make notes of what order things need to be done in. I usually create a mood board to stay inspired and also to see every angle of the costume. To keep all my fabric links organized, I put them into a subboard and into a column. I also needed a pattern, so I threw that in there too, and I really love that Milanote puts a little thumbnail up for each link so you actually know what you're looking at. And I give myself a couple little notes about how much fabric I'm going to need. You can also use Milanote to keep track of your budget. Just throw in a little table and you've got a little spreadsheet right there. And for the spreadsheet deficient people like me, you can pull the formulas up on the side. But for my people that actually know how to use spreadsheets, you can also just do the regular spreadsheet stuff. You can also download the Milanote app to take the whole plan with you when you go fabric shopping, meaning you can get a quick look at your reference photo without having to dig through all the photos on your phone while awkwardly standing there in Joann's. Or if you like paper planning, another really cool thing is you can actually export your entire board as a PDF and print the whole thing out. I legitimately make a Milanote board for every cosplay I make now. I really do. And I highly recommend it, as it is a truly powerful tool for organizing your creative projects. And it's totally free to sign up, with no time limit on it being free. So use the link in the description for your next creative project or cosplay. And if you're already using Milanote, and I know a bunch of you are, then let me know in the comments. Thanks again to Milanote for sponsoring this video. Let's belligerently make a historically inaccurate Regency gown now. So first of all, I want to make it clear that I am not making an exact recreation of the dress in the show. I found out that the underlayer of that dress is like a gold green shot fabric, and fabric like that is really hard to find and very expensive, so we're not doing that. And then the detailing on the dress, those big flower appliques, I kind of just don't like them, so I'm not doing that either. The fabric I did choose is an underlayer of plain green cotton, and then on top of that, a slightly more bluish green cotton voile, and then I found this beautiful 3D embroidered lace locally here in Atlanta at Fine Fabrics, and this stuff is so pretty. And then for the pattern, while I give as many shits about this being historically accurate as the costume designers do on Bridgerton, I still have never made like a Regency dress before. So I went with a Laughing Moon pattern because they're like historical recreation patterns. And I'm gonna get started on the bodice. So I went ahead and cut out all of my pieces from all of my fabrics, making sure that I liked the placement of the lace on the front, which in a second will not matter at all. And I went ahead and flatlined my cotton layer to my voile layer so that they can act as one. And because these fabrics will fray, I flatlined them on my serger. And then I went ahead and matched up all of my lace pieces to my cotton and voile pieces, and I got all the lace flatlined on there on the sewing machine so that I wouldn't have to run 3D embroidered lace through my serger. Plus, this lace is on a mesh, and mesh doesn't fray, so that doesn't matter. But I'm still not done yet. I do have all of my pieces now, but Penelope's bodice has like all these converging details coming into the center, and then she has like kind of a big flower in the middle. This embroidered lace ends with this really pretty border on the bottom of it. Look at that. And I had enough scrap pieces that I was able to cut off some of this border and lay it out on my front bodice piece. But then for the centerpiece, I've got this thing prepared. So I took a piece of the lace and just kind of pleated it up until it became a flower. And then I ripped off, like literally ripped off, because these 3D flowers are just glued onto the fabric. Before I put this on, I'm going to hand sew this into a pretty little flower detail. And while I'm at it, I'm gonna add a bunch of beads to make this centerpiece like really sparkly. For this piece of trim that I have already pinned onto the bodice, I'm actually gonna need to unpin it for now because I forgot that this pattern has a dart. So a dart is basically a partial seam. You take the two sides of the dart, you fold them together, you get that pinned together, and then you go over to the sewing machine and you sew that little fold into the fabric. You see darts a lot more in historical clothing because darts use less fabric than seams do because you're using one piece instead of cutting two. So back in the old-timey times when fabric was really expensive, they would conserve it any way they could, and darts were a way to do that. I'm not very good at darts because I don't really like them. I find that seams usually look better. If you don't do your darts perfectly well, you can end up with weird little puckers in them. I once heard that the way you do darts is you sew up from the bottom, and then when you get to the tip of the dart, you don't just go right off the fabric, that it's helpful to go like up a couple more stitches, making a little piece that's like just a little bit of a fold, and then you take it off, and then you hand tie the back of the darts. I don't know why that helps, and I don't remember who I got that from, but it's a thing you're supposed to do, apparently, so I'm sharing it with you. So I got the darts in, and then I flipped all the lace back down, and I only machine stitched it here at the shoulder seams, and then a little bit down at the bottom, because a machine stitch on top of this lace is gonna be really obvious. So for all this stuff in the middle, I'm actually just gonna go through and hand sew it on there, and then we can move on to actually assembling the bodice, which is going to involve a lot of piping, because they really liked piping in the Regency era for some reason. Actually, I looked it up, and on one blog post it said that piping was used a lot in sleeve decorations, but not really anywhere else. But if you knew that, I'm sure you already commented that I am wrong and stupid. Anyway, I was feeling lazy, so I just bought piping. I have a couple places I want to put this, but the first one I need to do before I can actually sew the bodice together is get it in this side back seam. So all I'm gonna do is put it onto the seam where the bump is facing away from the seam. I'm gonna get that pinned on, and I'm gonna get my piping foot, which looks like this. It's just a weird little foot with a groove in the middle so that the piping has somewhere to go. I'm gonna get this on the machine, put the piping in the little groove, and then sew the piping onto the seam on both of these pieces. This is why I bought a Regency dress pattern, because like, I wanted the weird back shape. Like, this is the back seams. These are so weird. Anyway, I'm gonna get these right sides together. I'm gonna get them pinned together, and then I'm still gonna use the piping foot to sew them together because the bump is still there, and we wanna still use that foot to get the bump into that groove, which will hopefully help the piping be nice and sandwiched on the inside of that seam, but we'll see. I usually don't do my piping very perfectly. Let's see how I did. Oh, that is fancy. Now that that's in there, I don't have piping to do for a hot minute because the next thing I gotta do is get these onto the fronts. So, God, with all this lace on it, this has such a nice, like, heft to it. I'm gonna get these right sides together. I'm gonna sew up these side seams and those shoulder seams. And then I gotta do more piping. Ooh, bodice. Ooh. Oh, I'm a ding-dong. This is what the shoulder seam is supposed to look like, okay? It comes into this part of it, and then there's a little bit of neckline left. On this side, I sewed the shoulder into the neckline, so whoops. I was like, I did 2 mock-ups for this. Why does this not fit? And by 2 mock-ups, I mean I did 1 mock-up, and then I made a purposely terribly fitting yellow version of this dress to wear in the long deep divey video about Penelope's dress. That's the entire reason I'm making this, which you should go watch. That video was originally just going to be part of this video, but after I read the book, I had so much to say that it kind of had to become its own thing. That is the shoulder seam. I'm gonna fix that. All right, there we go. More piping time. I'm not actually going to line this because I'm feeling lazy, but I did want to do piping on the neckline. So what I'm gonna do is get a piece of piping long enough to go around my neckline. I'm gonna sew that on exactly the same way I did the piping on the other side. I'm gonna sew all of that on, and then I'm gonna just fold it over and prick stitch it into the cotton lining on the back. A prick stitch is basically where if you have several layers of fabric, say you flatlined something, you're only going through that first layer of fabric so that the stitches are not on the actual outside. It's a great way to add trim to something and keep that trim down without actually having to add a lining. But if you wanted to be even fancier, you could make the entire bodice again and bag line it by sewing it around the neckline. But I'm being lazy, so I'm not doing that. But once I get that done, we can move on to the sleeve. The sleeves for this pattern are kind of weird, and I'm gonna try really hard not to sew them on backwards. But I went ahead and made my little sleeve band. Wow, it's got some piping on it. And before I close this sleeve up, I'm gonna do a gathering stitch on the bottom side and the top side, because this is gonna have to get gathered both to the sleeve band and into the armhole. And I'm doing this gathering stitch on the machine, so I'm just gonna use the longest stitch length that I have. Make sure I give myself 2 long tails, and then when I take it off the machine, I just have to pull the bobbin thread and it'll gather it up. So now I can close the sleeve up, get that stitch in, get my sleeve band put right sides together with the sleeve, sew around this little hole, and I get a sleeve. Movie magic, now I have 2 of them. Okay, no, I have not finished the piping on this yet, but I'm gonna go ahead and sew the sleeves on. Oh, and Penelope's dress has these little, like, feathers and stuff right here. I don't have any green feathers. I couldn't find any green feathers in fine fabric. So I'm gonna take a little piece of that border lace and I'm just gonna like gather it up and sandwich it in between the bodice and the sleeve so it'll kind of stick up right there on the shoulder and kind of look like the feathers. But I'm gonna get this pinned into there, get the sleeve pinned into the armhole, sew around the armhole, and we will have a bodice with, I think, a little bit of a problem. 2 problems, actually. I can't tell if this is going to close in the back, but maybe more importantly, I'm itchy. The fit problem I'm gonna wait till after the skirts are on to fix, but the itchy problem I have halfway already solved. Most of the itchiness is coming from the sleeves, so all I did was sew some bias tape around the seam allowance, and that is helping the itchiness significantly. And before you're like, Sarah, you're supposed to wear a chemise with a Regency gown. I don't wanna wear sleeves under my sleeves, and you can't make me. Anyway, I'm gonna ignore the problems with this for now, and we're gonna move on to the skirts. I've got a giant pile of fabric because the skirt is going to be, again, 3 layers of fabric. But these are not going to get flatlined like the bodice because I want these to flow freely, and each of these is gonna get sewn together very differently. For the bottommost layer, the cotton, all I'm going to do is sew the panels together regularly and then serge the edges of the seam allowances, and that'll be done. And I'm also going to leave the hem for later because we're gonna hem it once everything's on the dress. Then for the voile, I'm actually gonna do French seams. French seams could best be described as double seams. The goal at the end is to encase all of the raw edges within the fabric itself. It's something you do with a lot of sheer fabrics because if you tried to serge them, you'd see the serging through the sheerness of the fabric. But basically all you do is sew all of the pieces together, wrong sides together, first. With a fabric like this, there isn't a right or a wrong side, but if you're working with a printed fabric, that would matter. But once I have that first set of stitches in, I'm actually going to trim all of my seam allowances down and then take them over to the iron, and instead of pressing them open, I'm gonna press them into a fold. Then I'm gonna take them back to the sewing machine and sew down that fold, which will encase all of my seam allowances into that little fold, giving me a nice clean seam with no raw edges and no serging. And again, this one I'm not gonna hem until it's on the dress. And then for my final one, because this mesh doesn't fray, I'm just gonna sew it all together regularly, no serging, no French seams, nothing. We're just gonna sew those together and press them flat. However, the hem on this one's gonna be different because this fabric already has a hem on it. So I can't hem it from the bottom. I have to hem it from the top. So I'm gonna have to make sure the skirts are cut to the right length before they go into the dress. And to do that, we gotta go back to the bodice because I also have a waistband I wanna add. Here's my waistband. The pattern itself has this as a belt, and I don't know if you noticed yet, but I'm not following the pattern instructions. I didn't even read them, but they're gonna go right sides together. They're gonna get a stitch across the bottom. And then I'm gonna be able to use that to figure out how long the lace skirt needs to be, which is really just going to involve me putting on the bodice to see where it hits the floor. Many French seams later, I have 3 skirts. First thing, I am gonna feed each of these skirts to each other, because the next thing I'm gonna do is baste them together. So I'm gonna get them all lined up around the top, and I'm just gonna run a straight stitch all the way around the top. And this stitch is really just to keep them together, so it makes the next thing easier. And the next thing is sewing it onto the bodice. So I'm gonna find the center front of my bodice, and I'm gonna find the center front of the skirt. And this pattern, again, didn't read the instructions, but I did see the pleat markers on the pattern when I cut it out. It seems like you sew it on straight in the front, and then you just do a bunch of pleats in the back. So I'm gonna do that. And I am doing this the very lazy way, and then I'm just gonna take the ends here. And yes, I still have not fixed the fit issue. We'll get there. I am gonna take the skirt to the end of this waistband so that it overlaps the other side of the skirt. Because the other thing I did that I did not mention is on all 3 of the skirts, I left like a 11-inch gap and just finished each of these edges. Anyway, again, being lazy, but I'm just gonna pin this onto this end and the other side's end, and then I'm gonna keep pinning the front flat. But when I get to this back seam, I'm just gonna start pleating. Wherever those pleats need to go, they're gonna go, and that will be that. I don't really care if the pleats are perfectly right. They're pleats. They're gonna look like pleats even if I measured them. But yeah, once I get those pleats pinned in, I'm just gonna do one more stitch to secure the skirts to the waistband. Anyway, let's fix the fit issue. So first of all, how did this happen? The first mock-up I cut at the size that I was on the pattern size chart, but it was way too big. So I took it in a couple places, but this mock-up was a single layer of fabric, and a single layer is going to have way more stretch than 3 layers. I also am a lazy person and almost never pre-wash my fabric. So I also suspect that some of the pieces might have shrunk when I ironed them. I originally wanted to do a zipper, but I can't with how small it is. So here's the solution. An extra little flap at the back and dress hooks. That's it. It's not ideal. It doesn't look like it was supposed to, but I don't care. It's at the back of the dress. Anyway, it's finally time to do all the hems. So for the cotton layer, I just did a double fold hem. That's where you just fold the fabric up twice and sew across the top of that fold. A hem like this also always is going to look nicer if you press it first before you sew it. And then for the voile, I just decided to be lazy and do a rolled hem on my serger. But if you don't have a serger, you could just do a double fold hem again. And then there's only one more thing to figure out. Am I even allowed to wear this? Buckle up. I'm the cosplay police, and I'm here to tell you the rules of cosplay. Can I cosplay a character if I'm not the same size as them? Yes, you can. Can I cosplay a character if I'm not the same race as them? Yes, you can. But in both cases, be respectful. It is okay to play with your body proportions. It's okay to make your waist a little smaller, your hips a little bigger, your boobs a little bigger, make your boobs go away. Because bodies change day to day, and bodies can change a lot over a long period of time. But you know what never changes? Race. Do not change your skin color for cosplay. It's kind of the only rule. Don't do it no matter what. Here's the thing though. I know that the feeling that you have to stick to characters that are your body type, I know it doesn't come out of nowhere, but this is cosplay. It's literally a billboard saying, I like this thing and this is my favorite character. You should talk to me about it and be my friend if you like this character too. And if you're in the same age range as me, be appropriate. Y'all, anyway, it's not that serious. There are no actual cosplay police. But I, the cosplay police, am here to tell you, if you're a different size than that character, wear it anyway. A different race, a different gender, you want to change that character's gender, do it anyway. And yes, I am aware that it is very easy for me as a white girl to sit here and say this. I will not pretend to know some of y'all's pain. And yes, there might be some people online that push their glasses up at you and call you the blank version of that character. But fuck those people. They are not worth a second of your concern. Living for the estimation of others is a trap. This was the first dress that I had an emotional connection to on this show. And it was on a character that I really love. And that is what matters most in a cosplay, not the shape, size, or color of the character wearing it. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel directly, you can check out my Patreon. We'll get some exclusive content, but if you're just watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, sending the video to a friend of your mom, or subscribing, please subscribe, then you're supporting the channel too, so thank you. And a big thank you to my newest big support tier patrons, Emmy, Moragini, Wolf, Corey, Joy, Cam Jam, and Twisted Dreams Foulest. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!